We're so going to hell.
America soundtrack.
Fuck yeah! Are you people not patriotic? You're either with us or you're with the fucking terrorists! Fuck yeah! Fuck yeah! Fuck yeah!
Shoot that man.
Hello? All right. Whew. I am here. Usually I give a talk about technology, or I give a talk about technology and law. This time, I'm just giving a talk about politics. It's not going to be about technology. Fuck yeah! There's going to be some technology involved here only because it has to be, because it's central to the question that I'm going to address. But this is a talk about politics. If you want to hear about computers, go somewhere else. Second, whatever political convictions you have, well, I mean, depending on who you are, I'm probably going to piss you off, okay? My opinions are not the same as yours, and as far as you're concerned, my opinions are going to be wrong. If you don't like being pissed off, or... Eh? So, hey! Who said that? Saddam Hussein is not Canadian. All right, so I want to make it clear that I'm going to piss you off. So, you know, if you're the kind of person that, you know, can't deal with it, that's right. But that talk, I don't know. It's a long story. So, what I want to talk about is freedom. And freedom, as we understand, is a fundamental value in this country. When you think of... No. Freedom as in... I don't know. Freedom. Yes. Okay, fine. I'm going to go there. So, how many people in this room run Gen 2 Linux? Raise your hand. Ooh, a couple of you. Okay. Raise your hand if you run Gen 2 Linux. Keep it up. All right. So, if you... Keep your hand up if you run it in production. We got two. No, we got one. We got one. All right. Is this at two, three? Is this at work? Keep it up if... Oh, shit. Okay, so... Here's the timeline, all right? July 30th, No, June 30th, rather. June 30th of 2004. Some poor son of a bitch who works on SASL, which is this secure authentication layer for things like SMTP and IMAP, checks in some code, whatever. He's working on the project, checks in some code. 72 hours later, the Gen 2 people take tips from CVS and ship it to their entire user base. Now, a week later, June 6th, the guy realizes that he created a remotely exploitable, code execution problem, and he checks in the fix. I assume that the guy had slated time once a week to work on this fucking open source project, and that's when he worked on it. So he checked in the broken code day one. 1 week later, when he was working on it again, he said, "Oh, that's broken," and he fixed it. So everyone in Gen 2's, everyone who is a Gen 2 user who happened to rebuild this package during that period of time between June 2nd and September something or other got his broken-ass code that he checks into tips. Quality assurance processes exist for a reason. I had to explain to my boss that building a computer security management system for Gen 2 Linux was like building a healthcare program for professional skateboarders. You are lucky if tips build, and it does not work, period. Well, the thing is that, maybe, but the thing is that these various distributions that are not Gen 2 tend to, stick to a particular major release of a piece of software and then backport patches. And the reason they do that is so that they know that this particular piece of code was actually tested and it actually works. So please, Gen 2 is cool if you want to play around at home and you've got lots of source code and you can dick around with it, but don't run it in production. All right, that was totally off topic, but I wanted to bitch about that because I was like, what the fuck? All right, so freedom. Freedom is what I want to talk about. And the thing about freedom is that basically what it boils down to is that it's a fundamental value for this country, but I don't think we understand it very well. I don't think we do a good job of defending it because I think we have the wrong ideas about it. The thing about freedom is that I have the responsibility to take care of myself. And I can go do something that you may not like. It might be dangerous. I might hurt myself. I might hurt somebody else. And I'm considered responsible for my own actions. If I choose to do that thing that's dangerous, I know it's dangerous, I do it, and if it ends up being a problem, that's my problem. Exactly. I have the freedom to run Gen 2 in production if I want to. No one is going to tell me not to. The opposite of freedom is a situation where we come in and we say it's illegal to run Gen 2 in production. You are not allowed to do that, and you will be prosecuted if you do so. Not because of, basically to protect you from fucking yourself. This country doesn't have a good concept of that, and this is why. The thing is that everyone's sort of interested in their own interests. Everybody has a special interest, and I use that word very specifically. Maybe you're into guns. You like to, screw around with guns on the weekend. You like to go shooting, hunting, whatever. Maybe you're into the internet, and you like to say fuck on the internet a lot on the weekends, whatever. Fuck yeah! Everybody's got something that they're into, right? So the problem is that the majority of people in this country are not interested in the thing that you're really into. Otherwise, you wouldn't be unique. You wouldn't be an interesting person. Nobody would talk to you. Everybody's got something that makes them special. And that thing is unique and hence not popular. That's the deal. The problem is that because we're a democracy, there tends to be this tyranny of the majority stuff that goes on from time to time. And we tend to control things that we don't understand or that are unpopular and maybe dangerous. I'll give you a perfect example. Is there anybody here who's a skater? Anybody skateboard? Did you bring your skateboard here? No. Okay, there's a couple people who actually did bring their skateboards, and they were skating out in the parking lot, and they got busted. And the reason they got busted is because the hotel is liable if they launch their fucking skateboard through somebody's windshield or they fuck up and break their hand. The hotel is liable, not the individual. You're out there skateboarding. Skateboarding is risky, okay? Like running Gen 2 in production. And, if you fall on your ass, you were asking for it. You were skateboarding. So as a result, you can't skateboard at all. You are not free to skateboard because you might fuck up. And the reason for that is that you are not held responsible for your actions. Somebody else is. Somebody else takes responsibility. The hotel takes responsibility. But at the same time, you can drive a car in the parking lot, and if you mow a couple people down in your car, nobody's going to sue the hotel, all right? It doesn't work that way. Everybody has a car. Cars are popular. Hence, nobody's going to create restrictions that would result in cars not being allowed in parking lots. However, skateboarding is a kind of fringe activity, all right? Hence, people decide that, we need to create these regulations that restrict skateboarding because it's dangerous. You might hurt yourself. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. But that is, the scenario I'm describing is a scenario that totally exists within the framework of civil law. It's somebody sued it wasn't the government wasn't involved here. They didn't pass legislation. Somebody sued the hotel and was awarded damages because their son wiped out on a skateboard in the hotel parking lot. So what I'm really interested in is what's going on in the legislature. And I'm gonna try to nail both parties because both parties are absolutely responsible for this, and both parties are totally hypocritical about it. That's no. So I'm going to start with video games. How many people here have ever played a first-person shooter? Yeah, exactly. All of you played it. Do you think it's dangerous? I can't have a serious conversation with anyone around here. God damn it. You people are not going to run out. How many people here have actually killed another human being? Raise your... I don't... Bullshit. There are a group of people who believe... There are a group of people who believe that the reason that... Shut up! I'm talking. It's quiet time for you. All right. So, there are a group of people who believe that the reason that the guys in, Dylan Klebold and whoever the fuck in Littleton, Colorado, decided to go on a shooting spree in their school is because they played too much Doom. Doom was responsible, okay, entirely. And people who play too much Doom will eventually shoot up their school. I think, I've played, I'm not as much of a hardcore gamer as some of you people, okay? Flips here. But the thing is... The thing is that, I've played a fair number of first-person shooters, and I think that I ought to have the right, if I feel like it, to go play a first-person shooter. I can take responsibility for myself. I'm not going to go kill anybody. The Democratic Party doesn't agree. And I kind of got into this explanation, and I'm drunk right now, and the whole purpose of this rant business is that I be drunk. And so my presentation of the ideas is going to be a little bit disjointed. The thing is that the fundamental philosophical problem this country has is that we defend our interests. When somebody says you can't play Quake, we're like, fuck you, I play Quake all the time. And I'm going to play, thank you, sir. I'm going to play Quake all I want. But, if somebody's talking about regulating somebody else who's involved in an activity that you don't participate in, you have a different attitude about it. Somebody who plays around with guns on the weekends because they like guns. You're going to be like, well, we should control that because guns are dangerous. And it's because it's not your hobby, because it's not something that you take an interest in, you tend to be more sympathetic to the idea that it ought to be controlled. Understanding freedom appropriately has to do with being able to allow somebody else to take responsibility for their actions. It doesn't have to do with you. It doesn't have to do with what you think you can take responsibility for. It has to do with whether or not you trust other people to take responsibility for themselves and to have the freedom to do what they want to do. So the Democratic Party, and I'm going to start with the Democrats because the Democrats think that they're, advocating freedom or whatever. The Democratic Party does not like video games. They don't like the idea that people can go out and buy these first-person shooters and train themselves to be killers and then go shoot up a school. So they've created this rating system, and the guy who's primarily responsible for it is Joe Lieberman, who was Al Gore's vice presidential nominee. Joe Lieberman has held several hearings over the past decade about video game violence and has created a rating system for video games. And it's fundamentally because he's worried that, people who play these games might end up killing people. And there are three rating systems that are really important. One of them is the video game rating system. One of them is the rating system on music, the little explicit lyrics logo on your CDs. Yes, Tipper Gore, another Democrat, okay? Jesus. One of the things that pisses me off more than these two rating systems is the movie rating system. And within the framework of the movie rating system, and I don't know who supported it because it's much older than the other two, but it's related. And it's a perfect example of both why rating systems don't just affect the things that children can do. And it also, I remember when I was 17 years old, maybe 16, I went to go see Terminator 2. It was in the theater, and I was all hyped up because this was cool. I was a computer geek, and there were robots fucking destroying shit. I wanted to see it. So I go there, and I have some kid who's like 2 years younger than me telling me that I can't go see the movie because I'm not 18, and I need my parents' permission. Okay, robots from the future are fighting a 14-year-old protagonist. This is a children's film. The amount of violence in Terminator 2 is about the same as the amount of violence in, G.I. Joe's Saturday morning cartoon. This is a children's program. Adults are not sitting around watching robots from the future attack, 14-year-old protagonists, except for the people in this room. So they're preventing children from watching children's films. It's a little silly. But it goes beyond that. The Team America, we heard the theme song from it before I started speaking. Fuck yeah. Team America had a 3-minute, and this whole movie is made with marionettes, puppets. This movie had a 3-minute marionette sex scene, okay? And it's funny. And they cut it. They cut it because if they didn't cut it, they were going to get an NC-17 rating, and no movie theater will show an NC-17 film because when people hear NC-17, they think porno with a plot. So as a result of this rating scheme, you cannot go to the movie theater and see two pieces of wood bumping up against each other because it's funny. All right? They cut some of it out. I don't know. I don't know the details. I haven't seen the movie. Well, all I'm saying is that the fact that you have a rating scheme actually affects your practical freedom. You can't go to the movie theater and watch marionettes bump against each other. You can't do it. So,
you can watch a lot of people get killed in various ways.
This is what... that's true, but this is what really pisses me off about the Democrats. The Democrats claim to be ardent supporters of freedom of speech. They want you to be able to create whatever art you can create, okay? At the same time, they're creating these rating systems that fuck all kinds of shit up. The place where they seem to be like ardent defenders of the right of people to speak is related to the NEA, the National Endowment for the Arts, and they fund projects using my money that offend people. Fine, whatever. Art is supposed to, breach new boundaries. Okay, so the NEA, the NEA funds stuff that's offensive. Fine, and they're going to defend it. They'll defend it to the death. The NEA has the right to fund stuff that offends you. Fine. The thing that pisses me off is that the same people that are going to fight to the death to defend the NEA's right to fund somebody who's making art in a museum in New York with feces are creating a rating system that prevents me from paying my own money to go to a movie theater and watch two marionettes bump against each other. It's ridiculous. Now, the Democrats, in some circumstances, are great defenders of freedom. One of their, and I don't want to get too mired in this discussion because it's way too complex, but, one of the Democrats' big issues is abortion. They believe that it is a women's right to make a decision about what they're going to do there. They can, and there's several supporters of that position. So, and I'm going to be very careful there because it's a very contentious issue. But the thing is that, they will fight for that right, and that has to do with freedom, right? You have the responsibility to make your own choice, right? The government isn't going to fucking tell you what you're going to do. You're going to decide, and we respect your right to decide. That's what it's about, right? At the same time, and I've heard this from two different people who are friends of mine who are Democrats in two totally unrelated contexts in the recent months with respect to the expiration of the assault weapons ban. Okay? They say, why do you need a bayonet to go hunting? You don't need a bayonet to go hunting. You need a bayonet to restore an antique war musket. That's why people buy bayonets.
Who in this country besides the army or something needs a freaking AK-47?
The AK-47s are fully automatic. The assault weapons ban actually referred to semi-automatic weapons. And I said I was going to piss you off, so I did. Ha. So, anyway. If I want to sit in my house on Sunday afternoon and make a fucking antique war musket that my grandfather might have carried into battle operational, and I need to buy a bayonet in order to complete the project, I ought to be able to buy a bayonet. I'm not going to kill anybody. In fact, nobody, except for a couple weird exceptions, has been bayoneted in the United States of America in over 100 years. This has nothing to do with crime, okay? The problem is not the defense of freedom in certain circumstances. The problem is the perspective about it. We consider that certain things are in our interest, and so we defend them, but other things are not in their interest, and so we do not. If we really believed in freedom, we would consider in every circumstance that the other person has the responsibility to make their own decision. And we respect their right, if it's possible for them to do this thing and not hurt anybody, to do it and not hurt anybody. That's what freedom is about. So I've railed on the Democrats for a little while. I'm going to rail on the Republicans, which I'm sure will, garner some cheers from this crowd. I have here, and I will leave it up here after I'm done talking, the official party platform of the Republican Party for 2004. They have these national conventions. The national conventions do two things. They choose candidates for office, number one, and number two, they approve party platforms. Yeah, that too. I think that, what's the News Weekly in New York City? There was some article about people, they had 1,001 reasons they were pissed off that the RNC was in New York, and one of them was all these, people who were out sport fucking the candidates. I don't know, whatever. It was, anyway, whatever. Politicians. Look, this is what they do at this convention. And this convention is really important. It gets lots of press coverage. They make this document and they choose their candidates, which they already chose. Okay? Everybody knows Bush is going to be the Republican candidate for president. We don't have to have a convention to figure that out. So really, what's important about the convention is this. You'd think you could get this on the GOP's website. You cannot. Now, on the DNC's website, you can get their official document. Of course, it doesn't really have much to say. This is a hell of a document. It's really long, and they go into detailed explanations of how they plan to address all kinds of issues affecting us. And actually, if you read it, for the most part, it's reasonable. There's a couple of sections which are a little bit, silly, like, the way to defend environmental, and to protect the environment is to, ensure that people have more or better private property rights and less regulation. There's a couple things in here that are questionable. For the most part, it's reasonable. Yeah, whatever. So I'll get to that later. So the thing is that this document is not on the GOP's website, and this has been discussed in the press, and I can give you references if you want it. There's a very specific reason for that. Karl Rove does not want this on their website. He does not want most of the Republicans to actually read their own platform, and there's good reason for it. A political party is a group, is a coalition of different people who have different views. One of the people who is a part of the Republican Party's coalition is the conservative Christians. And there are a large number of concessions to that group in this document. And if the sort of Midwestern, I just don't want the Republican, or I just don't want the government on my back kind of Republicans ended up reading this, they probably wouldn't vote for the Republican candidates. So They've controlled its distribution. They've sent it out to very specific people. And if you want to read it, you have to Google around. Yay, Google. Without Google, I would have never found this fucking thing. So the thing is, fuck yeah. So the thing is that the Republican Party presents itself in general as being the party of freedom. They believe in personal responsibility. You are taking care of yourself, and the government is not taking care of you. We don't have this nanny state that's giving us welfare and all that other crap if we can't take care of ourselves. It's your responsibility. That's what freedom is about. But the problem is that they've aligned themselves with a number of people who have absolutely no interest in freedom at all. And I'm going to talk about that. I'm going to talk about the fundamentalists. The fundamentalists, and we all know, what their policy platform is. And it's in here. They want prayer in schools. It's in here. They want the 10 Commandments on the courthouse wall. It's in here. They want to censor the internet. It's in here. And I'm going to get to that more specifically a little bit later. They talk about it, but they have a large series of constitutional amendments that they want to propose. And this really strikes to the heart of what I'm talking about. Yeah, I need to drink more.
There you go. Dude, when your sister calls you out, you better get to drinking.
I've been drinking a lot longer over the past 72 hours. All right. You're right. So we know about this stuff. There's a huge series of constitutional amendments that they propose here. They don't like the Constitution. They want to change some of it. One of the things they want to do is a victims' rights amendment, which kind of changes the balance of the way that courtroom proceedings occur, and that's a very complex issue. I'm not going to get into it because it's a little bit of a tangent, and it's actually a bipartisan thing. If you're interested in why that doesn't make sense, I'll talk to you about it later. They have and it's not just their fault, but they also have some other amendments. They want a gay marriage amendment. I will talk about that because it's very instructive and it's simple. They have another amendment, which is an abortion amendment, and that's probably the primary reason why Karl Rove doesn't want this on their website. They want an amendment which states that a fetus is a citizen as far as the United States government is concerned. It has all of the rights that the Constitution affords people. So in that context, there will be no abortion, period, which is as radical a position as you can get on the issue. And once again, I don't want to dive too deeply into the abortion question because it's very emotional and it's very complex. But they're very strong opinions about this issue. In any event, as far as the American people are concerned, this position is very radical. People who are the victim of rape will not have access to abortion. People who are the victim of incest will not have access to abortion. People whose lives are threatened by the pregnancy won't have access to abortion if you create a situation in which the fetus has every constitutional right. And that's essentially what they're proposing. And it's part of their document. It's part of their official platform. You can read it if you want. I don't know how that works. That's a detail. It's a constitutional amendment, okay? So what I'm actually going to talk about is the gay marriage issue. And I'm going to talk about it in Georgia as opposed to in terms of what they're doing federally because Georgia is very instructive. In Georgia, they're proposing this piece of legislation that actually has two paragraphs, a paragraph A and a paragraph B. Paragraph A says, marriage is something that occurs between a man and a woman. It's not about your opinions. It's a fact. That's what they're proposing. Paragraph B says that the state shall not extend any services which would extend to a married couple to a same-sex couple in the civil union or whatever the hell. It basically says that the state shall not recognize a marriage between anyone who is not a man and a woman, and then the second section says, and they shall not provide any of the things that we provide to marriages to other people. So what's important to understand, I guess, is that in Georgia, most of the people in the state agree with paragraph A. They agree that regardless of it's not about your opinion, it's about what the people in the state of Georgia think. And statistically, what they think is that marriage is something between a man and a woman. That's what they think. Paragraph B is not something which is largely supported in the state of Georgia. And how many people here are familiar with HIPAA? Yeah, I'm sure a few of you work in that space. I'm not very impressed with HIPAA. When the last time I went to the doctor's office, I was given this HIPAA-related privacy form. And what I learned is that whenever the FBI wants, they can request my medical records, and they don't have to get court approval. We even went further than that. It said whenever the CIA wants, they can request my medical information, and they don't have to get court approval. Okay? that's where privacy counts, all right? And HIPAA doesn't protect me at all. But where HIPAA protects me is when my buddy gets thrown in the hospital and he's unconscious, and he's my friend. So I'm not a family member. The hospital isn't allowed to tell me whether or not he's alive or dead. Furthermore, they're only allowed to talk to family members, and they're only allowed to talk to family members in person. So if his family members happen to be out of state, they can't talk to anyone about him. And I went through this personally, and it was a fucking nightmare to deal with it. I had to argue with like several layers of bullshit infrastructure in order to get to the point where I convinced them that you have in fact cut this person off from the outside world, and nobody knows whether or not they're alive or dead, and we want some fucking information. That's what HIPAA does. As far as I'm, maybe we can debate. Maybe there are some things in there that are good, but I'm not impressed so far. It protects my privacy when it's harmful, really, to do so, and it doesn't protect my privacy when it really matters. In any event, under HIPAA, if you're a homosexual and you've got a homosexual partner, and your homosexual partner gets hit by a bus, under this law, which states that we will not extend any of the services that we provide to married couples to homosexual couples, you couldn't find out whether or not your significant other or whatever was alive or dead from the hospital. You couldn't, because it would be illegal for them to tell you under HIPAA. And that's fucked up. And people in Georgia in general don't support that. So you've got this problem here, which is that you've got this law. Part of it the people in Georgia support, part of it the people in Georgia don't support. How do you get it passed? What do you do? Well, yes, lie is the correct answer. There's a couple places I need to go from here before I go back to the lying, because, again, I'm drunk and I'm a little disoriented. The first thing is, why would conservative Christians not want people who are involved in this long-term homosexual relationship to be able to find out about their partner when their partner got hit by a bus? Okay, so my answer to that question is that some of those who work forces are the same that burn crosses, and I will show you why they're unethical when I get to the part about the lying. The second thing is, you've got paragraph A and you've got paragraph B. This is a messy issue because it's a place where the state and the church come very close together. And it's very difficult to maintain an understanding of what the state is doing and what the church is doing. What the church is doing is recognizing a spiritual bond between two people. What the state is doing is saying that once people are living together for a certain period of time, they have certain tax benefits, et cetera, certain infrastructural things. And the reality is that they have to acknowledge it on that level, but it's very practical. What do people mean when they say that marriage, when people in Georgia say that they think that marriage is a bond between a man and a woman, what are they talking about? Well, if we consider that they don't support paragraph B, which is really about the services the government provides, we have to accept that what they mean when they say that marriage is a bond between a man and a woman is that spiritually, religiously, marriage is a bond between a man and a woman. And they have every right to believe that. In fact, the Constitution absolutely defends people's ability to come to conclusions like that. The issue is this. If you make a law, a constitutional amendment, which states that, what you are doing is you are imposing a religious idea through the force of law. And so it affects religious freedom. If someone who is, and there's all this debate about in the Anglican Church about whether so there's some Anglicans in the United States that want to recognize homosexual marriages and other Anglicans that don't, particularly in Africa. And it's this big debate. And the thing is that, in the United States, you have the right to practice the religion that you wish to practice. And if there are people who are Episcopalian, which is the American version of the Anglican Church, because we hate those fucking Brits, believes that they should be able to recognize marriages between two men or two women, that's as in terms of a spiritual concept, that's their right. That's their right. And if it isn't their right, then we don't have freedom of religion. So the problem with paragraph A, which is something that most of the people in Georgia support, they agree with paragraph A, is that it's the wrong place to do it. It's not appropriate to impose religious doctrine through the government. The issue is that okay, so having said that, and that's why I think it's instructive, if you understand that the concept of what people feel about religion is spiritual, you can understand that it's not appropriate to impose religious doctrine through the government if you believe that people should have freedom of religion. And that's really my central point. But let me go to the lying. How do you get a law passed when most of the people in the state believe in Part A and they don't believe in Part B? How do you do that? They actually have to have a referendum in which the entire state literally votes for the law in the voting booth. What's the story? How do you deal with this situation? Well, you lie. And the people that designed the fucking referendum, constitutional amendment referendum process in the state of Georgia designed a mechanism for lying. The mechanism is that you don't actually have to show the text of your constitutional amendment to the people that are in fact voting on it. You get to paraphrase. So, the actual thing that will appear on the ballot in Georgia in November says, you know, click here if you think that marriage is something that only occurs between a man and a woman. Paragraph A. There's no discussion of paragraph B whatsoever. There's no additional text. You click paragraph A if you think that marriage is something that happens between a man and a woman, which they know most people in Georgia will do because that's what they think. So this is where I really get pissed off. And what I ask is that, I mean, in my opinion, and you can, I mean, maybe some of you disagree with me, and please tell me if you do, but in my opinion, this is about as clear cut as you can get. This is political shenanigans. Okay? If it's important enough to put it in the Constitution, it's important enough to show it to the people who are approving it. And you can't give somebody text and ask them to sign off whether or not they agree with it without actually showing them the text that they're signing off on. You have to, if you show them one piece of text and then you give them something else, what you've done is deceitful. No, you know, fine, but the reality is that they haven't had time, and you know, why do you get to paraphrase? What's the point? If it's a responsibility of people to check out the amendment beforehand, then why do we need to provide nice language for it? Why can't we just show them the fucking amendment? Okay, people in Georgia are dumb. We're not too literate. We can't read this legalese. That's a different discussion. So the thing is that it's deceitful. I think it's deceitful. I think it's very clear cut that it's deceitful. It's not a gray area here. We're showing you one thing, we're giving you something else. And that to me is dishonest, and I don't understand how that's compatible with some of the ideas that I associate with Christianity. It's not politicians that I know politicians lie. What I thought is that good Christians were honest, especially when they're dealing with a constitutional amendment that millions of people are approving. Okay? Apparently. Well, that's what I'm getting to. So let me read you a piece of legislation here, and I'm going to ask you if any of you recognize this piece of legislation after I read it. Whoever knowingly within the United States or in foreign communications with the United States by means of telecommunications device makes available any indecent communication in any form, including any comment, request, suggestion, proposal, image to any person under the age of 18 years unless or regardless of whether the maker of such communication placed the call or initiated the communication, or knowingly permits any telecommunications facility under such person's control to be used for an activity prohibited by paragraph 1 with the intent that it be used for such activity, shall be fined not more than $100,000 or imprisoned not more than 2 years or both. And I'm gonna paraphrase this. No, it's not. I'm going to paraphrase it for you, okay, because I'm a liar. What this law says is that if you say fuck on the internet, you go to prison for 2 years. Fuck yeah! Who knows what this law is? Somebody in this room knows what this law is. Come on. No. No. This is the Communications Decency Act. This is the actual text of the Senate bill. Okay. Oh, no, right. There was this FCC regulation. What he's saying is true. This is why the word indecent communication actually means the word fuck, because this law has to do with, it's the same rules that apply to FM radio during the day. You can't say fuck on the radio. Everyone knows you can't say fuck on the radio. What they're doing is extending this to the internet. They're saying any other telecommunications system. Oh, really? I haven't heard this. That's interesting. Oh, really? Okay, so let me ask you, who voted for this? Yes. Specifically, who voted for this? Yes. John Kerry voted to include this language in the Senate version of the Telecommunications Act of 1996. The Telecommunications Act of 1996, but I'm not talking about his approval of that act. He approved a bill that was just this language. It was an amendment to the act, and he approved adding this amendment to the act. There was no other language that he was approving. There was no room for confusion. He specifically voted to put people in prison for 2 years for saying the word fuck on the internet. Period. It is fucked. I'll tell you what else. John Kerry co-sponsored or voted for every key escrow and key and encryption export legislation which was proposed in the Senate during the 1990s. Period. Number 3, John Kerry is a copyright maximalist. And you don't have to take my word for it. If you go to his website, well, there's that. No. There are certain people like Patrick Leahy who are a little bit more intelligent. The reality is that John Kerry argues on his political website that, he argues on his political website that copyright law is too weak, and it's causing all these problems, peer-to-peer networks, all this stuff, stealing, from our creators, and we need to better defend their rights. Exactly. That's a long story. So anyway, whatever. What I wanted to point out there is simply that you have to understand. And I'm personally going to vote for John Kerry, and I'm going to explain why. But you have to understand that if John Kerry gets elected, he's opposed to pretty much everything that matters to this community. And it's going to be a rough time. I don't know. Veteran, whatever the hell his name is mostly interested in guns. Anyway, so what you have to understand, so the question is, how did this come about? Yes, I agree with that. I would vote for Jon Stewart in a second. You have to, what I want to talk about is how this law came about. This law was actually the law in the United States for a 6-month period of time at least. How did this happen, and how does it fit into the big picture? The way this started was, there's this group called the Christian Coalition, and they're associated with this guy named Pat Robertson. And their goal is to essentially create a Christian state. And Pat Robertson ran for president in the late 80s, didn't do very well, and until he met this guy named Ralph Reed. And Ralph Reed was a brilliant political organizer, and he went around to the churches back in 1993 and organized churches so that they would vote for Republican candidates. And he did it on a very wide scale. And what he did in 1994 was replace a democratically controlled Congress with a Republican-controlled Congress almost single-handedly. It was a revolution, and he was personally responsible for it. And in exchange for this great political favor, he had a list of things that he wanted. He had a list of demands because the guy created some serious power. And his demands were the things we're familiar with. Prayer in schools, blah, 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 no abortion, XYZ, censor the internet. That was on the list. At the time, despite the fact that the guy had taken control of Congress from the Democrats and given it to the Republicans, he still did not have enough power to actually do some of the things that he wanted to do. The only thing that the Republicans gave him out of their list of things that they wanted was this. And the reason is that not enough people in 1995 were using the internet for it to be a problem. Now, this is certainly bullshit. Make no doubt about it. They had a protest on the day that Clinton signed this bullshit into law, where people turned their websites black. IBM turned their website black. Now, I understand that their website is black now, but it used to be white. IBM, Yahoo, IBM, I want to look at IBM because they're a very conservative corporation, and they do not make sort of social commentary, like at random. Okay, they're very conservative. Why would how could this thing be so fucked up that IBM would decide that they're going to protest it? I mean, this has nothing to do with their business. I don't think so. Not IBM. It's a fucked up law. It's a fucked up law, and the Republicans went along with it because they knew that nobody gave a shit about the internet. There weren't enough people on the internet to actually affect an election. And the Democrats went along with it for a much more sinister reason. This thing was attached to the Telecommunications Act of 1996. That was a law that reorganized the Bell system and was essentially the framework the government was setting up for the internet boom in the late part of the decade. That's what they were trying to do. You would think that people on the internet in 1995 would have wanted to have a say in how the government was setting the framework for the internet in 2005. You would think that they would have opinions and that those opinions would be useful. Of course, the corporations that, operate these big network infrastructures had absolutely no interest in, the internet community being at the table. And the way to get the internet community off the table was to present them with a threat that was so grave that they would sink all of their resources into fighting it. And the result is, I had a buddy from South Korea come visit me a couple weeks ago. He lives there. He was born there. He's South Korean. He was in Atlanta for a couple days. I hung out with him, had some beer. He has a 100 megabit per second connection in his house that he pays $20 a month for. He does have to live in Korea. We don't have shit like that here, okay? And the reason we don't is because the Telecom Act didn't do what it needed to. And the reason it didn't do what it needed to is because the people who understood where the technology needed to go were not on the table because they were busy fighting this, and that's why the Democrats voted for it. So the thing is that, and you got to understand this is what the conservative Christians want. This was their big day in court. This was the reward that they got for totally changing the way the government works in America, by completely changing the balance of power in Congress. This was what they got. This is what they won. Well, whatever. They did change the balance of power, and this is the rewards from that. And this was their moment in court, and they got their ass handed to them in court by activist judges. This platform, and this is the most important thing that I think it talks about, it's very concerned about activist judges who declare laws unconstitutional. These people are very unhappy about it, and there's no case that was more critical for them than this. This was a major political strategic initiative, and they lost, and they were lost in the court system. And this was the moment when they realized that they had to change the way the court system works in America in order to be able to do this kind of stuff. And they have a three-pronged strategy. One thing is to pass constitutional amendments. The purpose of the court is to determine whether or not, in this context at least, is to determine whether or not the laws the legislature passing are constitutional. So if you change the Constitution, then you can pass the laws that you want, and the court can't say anything. The second prong is to limit the power of the court to review the constitutionality of laws. There was one moment in my mind in this debate process that really pissed me off. And that was when they asked George Bush what he thought about what Putin was doing in Russia. Putin has recently sort of rolled back democratic reforms. It's very scary. I really hope that it stops, but it's very dangerous. In any event, Bush's response was, I believe in a system of checks and balances. And I believe that the government ought to have checks and balances. This fucking made me furious. Fuck you. And the reason it made me furious was because of a court case that occurred a few months prior where It was actually it was this guy named Hamdi versus Rumsfeld, and basically because Congress basically authorized the president to engage force in Afghanistan. You have authorization to use any means necessary to deal with the Taliban. Blah 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 blah. And based on this kind of vague authorization for the use of force, the president decided that he could detain United States citizens indefinitely without trial as enemy combatants. No trial, indefinite detention. So they sued, and the Supreme Court finally got to analyze whether or not they thought that this question was correct. And of course they didn't. The president got his ass handed to him. Now, the problem is that he didn't get his ass handed to him as much as I would have liked. They said, actually he does have the right to detain people because it's within part of any and all means necessary. But because the Congress hasn't suspended the writ of habeas corpus, we're gonna require that these guys have a trial. But we're gonna invent. The Supreme Court actually did this entirely new system of trying people in these circumstances. And the standard for that system is guilty until proven innocent. Now, I love the Scalia dissent. Scalia, and he is a Republican. He was one of Reagan's appointees, and he disagreed with this. Whatever. He was one of Reagan's appointees. He considered a conservative judge. He fucking hated this decision, and I agree with everything he said about it. He said, "Look, you can detain people as prisoners of war if you release them after the conflict is done. If you want to detain them indefinitely, you have to try them, unless Congress has suspended the writ of habeas corpus, which means we're not trying people right now because we can't, because the courts aren't operational, because the shit's fucked up, and we're gonna hold people until the courts can be operational again, and then we'll try them." That's the way things have worked for 200 years in this country. And based on, President Bush decided, fuck it, man, I can just detain people whenever I want. You're an enemy combatant, you're going away. The Congress said, well, yeah, but, you have to at least pretend to discuss whether or not this person is guilty of something. And it infuriates me because basically this is a dramatic change in what our understanding of our rights, the rights of the accused in this country are. It's a very dramatic change. This is a court case that people will study in high school 100 years from now. It's the most important court case that has occurred in decades. And the administration of the United States was arguing that they did not need court oversight to detain people indefinitely, yet these guys support checks and balances. In this document, they discuss how they want to, and I mentioned this before, how they want to control the courts. I was talking about my strategies for doing that. One of them is to curtail the ability of the courts to review decisions that they make. The way that they want to do that, and they've actually tried this a couple times, they haven't actually passed one of these laws through the Congress, but the law says that the court system does not have the right to declare this unconstitutional. Now, I'm sure you understand a constitutional amendment is a very difficult process, whereas a piece of legislation only requires majority approval. A constitutional amendment requires like 3/4 approval and approval from the states. It's very difficult. So what they're saying is that we're going to pass a law that's unconstitutional, and then we're going to say you can't declare it unconstitutional. I'm sure that the court will simply toss out any legislation they pass of this sort, but it's a strategy, and they're trying it. The third piece of their strategy is simply to appoint people to the court who don't care and who are not going to declare their legislation unconstitutional because they're sympathetic to their interests. And this is where we get to the point where I explain why I'm voting for Kerry. And the reason I'm voting for Kerry is that potentially 4 Supreme Court justices are going to come up for replacement during the next presidential term, during the next 4 years. These people are old, they're retiring, they're possibly dying. Somebody is going to get to replace them. Now, I did say that Kerry voted for this piece of shit, and he did. And I don't really like Kerry, but the reality is that this was a Republican initiative. In fact, it sat at the heart of the strategy that is also propelling the court appointments that Bush is making, and is propelling the framework of the Republican Party's official platform. And this is not something that I'm interested in. I believe that I ought to have the freedom to say fuck on the internet if I so please. So the reality is that I want someone in office who's going to make a decision to appoint someone to the court who isn't going to say, I'm not going to declare this unconstitutional because the Congress approved it, and I really need to do what they said. So let me round this up. I know I've been rambling for a while. The problem is that we don't, the thing about this is that the people who support this don't say fuck on the internet. They don't say fuck on the internet. So they don't much like people saying fuck on the internet. They don't get it. It's not what they do. And hence, it seems okay for them to regulate it. In the same way that people on the left think it's okay to regulate someone's gun hobby because they don't like guns and they don't participate in it. So, they don't understand it. People defend their own interests. They're going to fight for what they want to participate in, what they do, what they care about. But something that somebody else does, they don't so much care. In order to really support freedom, what you have to be able to do is say, I don't like that. I'm not interested in that, but I know it's possible to do that without hurting anyone, and I'm going to give you the ability to make your own choices because I respect your freedom. It has to do with someone else. And the problem that we have is that these kinds of things that are threatened by this sort of action are things that are in the minority. Skateboarding, not driving cars. And over time, if we're very good at controlling skateboarding, controlling people who say fuck on the internet, controlling people who have gun hobbies, controlling people who do this, that, and the other thing, we're going to have a society in which everyone only does things that are normal, because those are the only things that aren't threatened. If we have a society where people only do things that are normal, we only drive cars, we don't have gun hobbies, we don't say fuck on the internet, we don't do all these weird things that scare people, we're going to have a very homogeneous society. And if we have a homogeneous society, we have a society that isn't going to be very creative. New ideas come from people who do interesting stuff. And if we have a whole society where nobody does anything interesting because we've regulated a lot of it, we're going to be weak. So that's basically my point. And that's it. Fuck yeah!